good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to open this exciting evening and meetup for a very interesting entrepreneurial talk with someone who went through the entrepreneurial path from beginning all the way to bringing a company to a real valuation and basically succeeded in something that many entrepreneurs try, and unfortunately many of them fail in the process. This specific entrepreneur is Rooly. He's one of the founders of Gigya, which is a successful company we're going to learn all about this evening. I want to thank Rooly for joining us today, and please accept Rooly. Good evening, Rooly.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us here in Eilat, Israel's most southern innovation ecosystem. We're very excited to have you here. You spent an entire day here and you met with many different types of startups. And we want to thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. Been great.
What we're going to do is have a short chat. We're going to start with getting to know you section. And let's dive right in. So, Uli, did you come from a high-tech background?
No. So, unlike many entrepreneurs that have an engineering background, I'm a little bit different. I actually studied architecture. My background is more in design and creative thinking. And then I realized that on the internet I have a better opportunity to express my ideas, because I worked 1 year as an architect and realized how hard it is to really do whatever you want. And the internet not only opens a lot of room for things that are unconventional, but it also you can make a difference in a much bigger scale. So it's not that you plan a building and it ends there. If you do something well, it can grow and be very big. So, and one more thing that I really liked in that environment, tech in general, but internet specifically, is that, and we will talk about it a little bit when we get to talk about creative thinking, the ability that you can change all the time. In general, although I studied architecture, I'm actually not a big believer in thorough planning. I think you need to have a vision as an entrepreneur, and you can plan. You need to have ideas of where things can go, but you cannot plan beyond a certain period of time. You need to focus on the short period of time while having a long-term vision, but you can't plan for 3 years from now.
Okay. I understand that you see yourself as a bit different from the classic entrepreneur type. Why is that?
So I think that mostly entrepreneurs, because most of them come from engineering background, they're thinking very methodically about things. They're looking, for example, for the definition of, usually you learn at every school, in MBA program, people learn that you need to find a problem and then you need to put a solution. So Facebook didn't come up because there was a problem, and also even Airbnb, it didn't come up from the place of how can we create more hotel rooms or something like that. It came more from, if you look at Facebook or other examples, more from the experience point of view, and how can the vision of, I mentioned Airbnb, was to not to sell a room, but to sell an experience, and I think that at least I see things from that point of view, and many entrepreneurs try to solve problems, which is also a good approach, but I take a different approach, which is trying to create new, maybe because of my background as an architect, that unlike the engineer that developed the building, that looks for a solution, I need a kitchen, I need a house, or 3 rooms, whatever. The architect is looking to bring a new experience, to design experience, and that's how I look also at projects.
Okay. We work with many young people who are interested in the startup world. Can you talk a bit about the idea of creative thinking related to tech and entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So first of all, in general, my thoughts about creative thinking is that usually people say you need to break, the rules, and which I agree, but I think that it's not the whole story. For me, creativity is understanding the rules and then deciding which ones you can allow yourself to break. I will give an example from, there are all the like riddles that require creative thinking to solve them, and like the most classic one is the one with the 9 dots. You need to connect with 4 lines, and the rule that you need to understand you can break is that you should get out of the of the square and continue the line. So it's not that I give you another example for a rule that you cannot break when you do this riddle, which is, to say I am God and therefore I can do that, or something like that. So you need to understand which rules there are, and which ones you just pose on yourself, but you don't need to pose on yourself. So I think it's the same with entrepreneurship. When you want to be to want to create something, you need to understand what limitations you can remove. You need to understand the limitation and then ask yourself, is this really necessary, or can I, do it in a different way that doesn't go through that rule.
So kind of realize there is a box, or there is a certain box, and then how can I push the box or the envelope, and which lines can I move or not move, and then understand the boundaries, and then working.
Understand the box. Exactly.
Understand the
not
box.
just saying I will break the rules. That's
Yeah.
not
Okay.
the solution.
Let's talk. We move to the second section of our discussion and talk about your career path. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you did before you founded Gigya, and what was the path that you took that brought you to where you are today?
Okay, so as I said, I began in a different space, and then I decided that the internet is a more interesting area for me, and I joined a startup. And I think, we're mostly talking here with entrepreneurs, but I think it's right for entrepreneurs, but for anyone who is looking to be in general in the tech industry. So first, what I want to say is that I joined a startup as a designer / creative director, because I had a design background. And this startup eventually, after almost 8 years, was acquired. But at that point, I was like number 2. I was managing, VP of product and marketing. And this process that I went through during these 8 years was, and that's the tip I give usually to young people, is that first you need to control your path within the organization you're joining, and for that to happen, you need to choose. It's less important what position you're taking, and more important what company. If you join a company that will enable you to take on yourself and grow within that organization, then that's the right place probably to go, or it's an important parameter. So that what happened to me. So I joined as a designer, and then I, beyond doing what I needed to do, I also got myself involved with other things related to product, and then I showed that I kind of contributed and gave value, and then I received more responsibility, and from there in marketing, and then I became VP product, and then VP marketing, etc. And then when the company was acquired, it was 2006 or something like that, and not many Israeli companies did this exit process, and therefore it gave me and 2 others from that company a lot of credit, which enabled us to go and raise money from investors and create our own company. So that's how I got to founding Gigya.
Okay. So let's talk about the Gigya story. How it all began.
Okay, so it was like 2007, and what we realized, we are 3 co-founders, and consider that we worked 8 years before in a different company, and now it's 18 years working together. It's amazing, and we still like each other. And So what we realized is that back then in 2006, we saw that people are using the internet not only as a source of information, because if you look at the beginning of the internet, it was more of an imitation of TV, meaning, but you could go to websites and get content, like news and things like that. And there were some services, but back then, social networks began to take more back. It was MySpace and some others. And we saw that people begin to really move parts of their lives to the internet. And we saw an opportunity there. And the company since then, 10 years ago, made some changes because a lot of things changed. Like MySpace went down and Facebook came up. But the thing we believed in and that guided us is that people will spend more and more of their time and put parts of their lives on the internet. And eventually we became, and that's what we're doing today, a company that manages your online identity, your digital identity, meaning all the information about you on the internet. We're doing it through the large companies. So our customers are actually companies like Nike, NBC, Dell, companies like that have already data about customers, but we help them manage it in the way that protect the privacy of the customers and also help them give better, more personalized service to these customers.
Okay, so this question is a little long, but it's a good one. So Gigya focuses on customer identity management for large companies. That's a very clear MVP, a very clear value to companies. But that's also an issue that is very difficult for many startups. Realizing what is your MVP, what is your main value point, and when you talk about validating your value point for your startup, how do you see that, and what is your recommendations to founders about that?
So first of all, I'm a big believer in the concept of MVP, or in other words, the idea that a startup needs to be very focused and very narrow. One of our investors always said the sentence that startups die not because of starvation, but from indigestion. So because they're trying to do too much. And I really believe that's the case. So my first, thing to say is that you should narrow as much as you can what you're doing, not only because you need to do less in terms of creating code or all that, but also because of the positioning of you will launch a company, nobody knows it, and if it will do a lot of things, people will not remember it. If it will do something very specific, people will remember it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that usually the successful companies are when the founders are the customer of the product. It's very hard for, let's say, someone who's 25 years old to create a solution for people, they go to pension, 70 years old. Because it's not, and it relates to what I said at the beginning of the experience and not the functionality. I think that it's very hard for us to, in a rational way, to understand things. We need to feel the thing. We need to feel the pain or to feel what the solution should be, and then we are able to define how to do it. So my point is that try to do something that you for sure will be the customer, because if you are not, if you say it's not for me but someone else will use it, it will be hard to be successful. So it can be very narrow, but it needs to solve something for you, to be useful or great for you.
Okay. You and your partners were successful in doing something very difficult, not only creating value, but also bringing the company to a worth of over $1 billion new Israeli shekels. Let's talk about that for a second. As founders, can you tell us about the work among you that brought you to that value point?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I think a big factor of the success of the company is the work among us. The fact that we enjoy, and I have, an explanation to why I think it worked out. But I think that the fact we worked so many years together and then decided to begin a new thing together means a lot. And I think the explanation is that we think that, each of us thinks that the others are very, very smart, or so even smarter than himself. And when you're working with someone that you think is at least as smart as you, or smart is the word, but as right, when there are debates, then you don't go home frustrated because something you think is not being done. For example, if I think you're smarter than me and we argue if we need to put this microphone here and here, and I give up and do whatever you think, if I think that you're smarter, then I will go home and tell myself, what, probably it was right. So I gave my opinion, but I don't feel hard with it. So bottom line is, try to work with people you really appreciate, and then you will enjoy it much more.
That's a very good point for teamwork. Let's move to section 3, the identity market. I know your business is about identity and that you're about to publish a book about the future of digital identity. Why is identity data so interesting for you?
Okay, so as I said, during these 10 years, we've been working with different aspects of that relate to digital identity, which is your data on the internet. And we see a few trends that happen. First, people spend more time and do more things on the internet, definitely since we have mobile phones, since the day smartphones began to be with everyone's having them, and also through social networks and communication channels now with WhatsApp, everything you communicate almost is digital and stored somewhere. On one hand, it creates two things. One is an opportunity for the companies that work with the people. So, if you go to an online store, now it's easier. The more they know about you, the more they can personalize the experience you have. But two, the other part is the privacy and security concerns. So first of all, people don't know where the data, who have their data, how it's being used, who is buying it from who, etc. And also, they're more exposed to criminal type of risks, to hacking, and they lock your data and that they don't give it back to you, so you can lose your data or expose your data. So there are opportunities and there is risk, and as time goes by, it grows. What we're doing in the company, and this is also what I'm writing about, is how this can be used in the right way and how can people be protected. And one more thing that happens now is also rules and regulations in different countries. There are a lot of new regulations. The most important ones, and it's a name people in the industry should know, called GDPR, which is in Europe beginning in May. All companies that have European citizens data need to enable every citizen, every person or customer to know exactly what the company knows about him. So if you go to a website and you have an account, you need to have like a place like My Account where it says everything it knows about you, and it enables you to control what you allow them to do with this data, or if you want to delete it, or if you want to download it. And there are such regulations in the market, and these companies understand they have to comply, and they need solution for that. And side by side, I give an example of a company that is one of our customers, Nestle. So Nestle is a company of 300,000 employees. They have hundreds of products in dozens of countries. Each one currently, or before Gigya, had their own website or app, for chocolate, for dogs' food, for mineral water, with storing their own database of customers. And it was very not utilized across, as a big organization, the data, and B, it was very hard to manage it in terms of security and privacy. For example, if you unsubscribe from here, maybe you need to be unsubscribed also from the other website. So they are using our solution to store all those websites and apps are talking with one database of customers, and then they can be smarter about the decisions for that customer. And on the other hand, if the customer wants to know what they know about them, they can easily present it to him or her, and or enable them to delete it, etc. So yeah, so in the book I'm also talking, if we'll have time I can talk, there are a lot of interesting subjects. The book will go out in 2 weeks in English only. But I'm talking about where things go in the future. So for example, the idea of ownership of data, how will we be able to really own and have this data only with us, and just give it whenever we choose, but it doesn't survive elsewhere. So once you give it, for example, after 5 weeks, if the company is not doesn't need it, it disappears. Things like that will happen. But if we have time.
So there'll be a trend where basically customers will have better ownership and more control over the data.
Yeah. I'm optimistic about it.
Optimistic about it. What do companies do with this data? Some of the things you said answer that, but what is the main use, if you have to summarize it? What is the main use of companies with our data?
So marketing. So I think people are very concerned that they're doing it, all kind of stuff like selling it or I don't know what, but mostly what they do, they understand, at least, there are decent companies and non-decent. We only work with large companies that really understand the impact of mistakes they might do. What they want is to when you have your experience when you're engaging with them, be optimized. So you don't, for example, if you bought a chair, instead of recommending you other chairs, it recommends you other furnitures because it understands that so they can also look for other similar customers, and when they advertise, instead of just advertising to the general public, it's more than just targeting. It's not just targeting males between 35 and 45. It's understanding what characterizes you and then try to buy advertising for people with the same characters.
What are the challenges and opportunities related to identity?
Okay, so the challenges, I think, first of all, the one that I described before with large companies, that they simply don't know. They want to be okay with their customers, but they don't know where this data exists on the organization. Each such company is using sometimes more than 20 vendors that one for sending newsletters, one for CRM, like managing support calls, one for targeting of advertising, and so forth. And company that hosts the website, and each of these companies have databases that store customer data. It's very hard for them to understand who is storing what. Definitely when there are multiple properties like brands and websites. So this is the main challenge. And I think that soon another challenge that relates to the new regulation is going to be that it requires, it doesn't allow you to have data that is not, you're not using it for something. And customers will have the option to say, how exactly they want, what the data they allow you to store and how they allow you to use it. And many companies that are based on advertising, for example, will have a big problem with that, because customers will say, I don't allow you to use it for advertising, but I want the service, and they will have to provide this service. On the customer side, on people's side, the challenge will be whether people will share more or will be more paranoid. And I think that the challenge will be that the value they will get will grow for the data, and therefore they will provide more data and will be more at risk. So I'll give you an example. Alexa is I will tell those that don't know, is like a speaker, like a unit you put at home, and you can give it commands and it will help you. For like a mini computer with a speaker, you tell it, what's the weather outside, it will tell you, play this song, etc. And it's very successful. Google also have this kind of thing. It's called Google Home, and now Apple has HomePod, and currently it's only working when you give it a command. So you say, Alexa, what's the weather? And it will answer. And it doesn't record anything else. But not far is the day where Alexa will tell you, do you allow me to listen to everything and record everything that is going on in your house? Because if you do, I can, find out if you have diseases, because I see, how often you go to the restroom, how your sleep pattern, what you eat. And people, if they know that it can save their lives or just, help them on that level, they will keep it on. And so I think we can't avoid it. But what I'm saying is that technology will provide more and more value, and therefore people will more and more share more data. So this trend will only continue.
Mm-hmm. Let's move to the fourth section and give some tips to entrepreneurs. So we have some founders in the audience and some that are listening and viewing the video. What would be a good advice to someone who's beginning their entrepreneurial path? Just something, rule of thumb.
I recommend don't work alone. I think that it's first when you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to understand it's a big journey and very hard mentally, not only in terms of the investment, and therefore you will always have the downtimes. And that's when most entrepreneurs break. There is always like the dips when you're sure. I was at least 3-4 times at the point when I was sure the company is going to be closed. Sure. And if you're alone, usually when someone is weak, the other, pushes and motivates. And when you're alone, you will just break. And I have friends who are alone and friends, entrepreneurs that work with either one or two co-founders, and you see the difference. So I think that's the number one tip. And as I said before, try to work with someone you think very, very highly.
Don't work alone and work with smart people.
Yeah.
Okay. Give us one thing that you think someone must never do as a founder of a startup.
Okay, I'll talk about one thing that is I think the biggest usually challenge that you have as an entrepreneur, which is sometimes you ask yourself, should I continue and do exactly that, or should I do it, make a change and change what I'm doing even a little bit? Because if most people I spoke with today are entrepreneurs that are still building the product. So this is, by the way, the most fun part of a startup, because it's just creativity. You're just thinking and creating. But when you go to the market, that, it's also fun, but it's much more trouble also. And you will see that suddenly people don't adopt your product. And then you ask yourself, should I just add features, make changes, or should I make a bigger change? That's usually the biggest conflict or challenge that founders have. And you ask, what's the biggest mistake? The biggest mistake is not doing the right thing at that point, meaning understanding. And I don't have an answer of what's the right way to know, but at some point you need to understand that you're banging your head on the wall and make a change. And at some point you need to simply put more effort and not give up. It's very hard to say.
Knowing when to change. All right. So another big issue for startups, go to market. That's a big deal. What is your approach, and do you have, again, some basic rule to follow when it comes to finding the good, solid go-to-market fit for your startup?
Okay, so it's an important question, because I think that the go-to-market is the most in most startups, at least in my space, internet, the biggest, the hardest part. First of all, you cannot think of advertising. I will talk a little bit. I think we have more time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. About advertising, but what I want to begin with is you cannot base your marketing and distribution strategy on buying advertising, because most startup, almost no startup did it in this way, and the reason is it's very expensive, and also it's I don't know how to say. I want to say the word. It's too easy because it's not. It's giving yourself a really like a break, too big of a break. You know, it's you need to be smarter than this. And investors will not invest in startup that say, yeah, we'll just buy advertising and then I will have distribution. The only case where you can go with this model is when you can prove that for each dollar that you spend on advertising, you pretty fast, like within a month or so, can generate like $1.50 or I don't know, above $1 from the product. And most startups can't generate immediately money. Usually this model is relevant when you're doing all kind of like casinos or all those sites that just generate money. They're not really a startup with a vision, but they're like money machines. And then they have a strategy of buying ads and taking as much money from the customer as they can, and then buying more ads, etc. So that's an exception. Nobody, I think, that I met today and I meet usually is doing this type of startups. And so the channels that you should consider, what are your options? The first option that I always recommend mostly is partnerships, because I think that if you create a product that can be interesting to a company that already has a market and audience and can expose it to them, and they have an interest in working with you together, you're not competing, you're kind of supporting each other. That's I think the rather easiest way to go to the market. The other options you have, if also we spoke about like viral kind of channels, then viral, the product needs to be viral. You cannot just say I will have a viral marketing. The viral marketing is a myth. Some videos and some ads become viral, but if anyone knew how to create them, it will be like magic, like free advertising. So don't count on this, but you can create a product that has viral qualities, so that it relates to working with other people, and then the customers will invite others. The other channel is, I mentioned it already today, is search engine optimization. So if you create content that will put you up in the results of Google, that's another way to get traffic. And then maybe advertising, but only if there is a quick return on investment.
So you need a good, solid go-to-market strategy that hits different channels.
No, it can be one channel. I can give examples of friends with startups that have one channel, but is developed very, very well, like partnerships. What I'm saying, my bottom line is that you need to have a real strategy and not just say, for example, this product fits greatly with, today we spoke about with a travel-related company, would work great for these travel companies to distribute. And of course, you try to talk with them, and after you prove it, then you can.
Okay. So the last section speaks about the future. The future holds a lot of different changes and different technologies that are coming around the corner. When we speak about digital identity, what do you think that is around the corner?
Okay, so I will go a little bit to the more philosophical side of this question. First, what I see from my research and what I see from my work is that people, as I said, share more data, but also people use more data to improve themselves. So there is a movement called, for example, quantified self, which is people that store data about themselves in order to better understand who they are. I'll give you a simple example. Everything they eat, or if they do a workout, they record it. And then they also record their sleeping patterns, or what's their, like every hour, what's their mood, if it's good or bad. And then they try to see correlation. So they see if they drink milk before they go to sleep, then they don't sleep well. Or if they don't eat before a workout, they feel better on the work, whatever. Because we are, so Daniel Kahneman, the Prize Nobel winner, is saying that we have two ways of thinking: quick thinking and slow thinking, or fast thinking and slow. The fast thinking is like the animal. So, you know, if this is hot, then I will remove my hand immediately. That's not a rational decision. It's more of intuition, or kind of more fast type of decision. And then the slow thinking is more the rational decision making. So I'm considering all the facts and take a decision. And he says that in many places where we need to take slow thinking decisions, we're just doing following our intuition, and therefore we're making a lot of mistakes. Like classic examples are how people manage their stock market. When they buy and sell stocks, they don't, they're doing it out of emotion. So of course, we'll get to talk about, there is a lot of room for taking decision based on emotions, but what I want to say is that the more data we have about ourselves, the more we will go and take the second type of thinking, like slow thinking type of decisions. We will be more rational about our decisions. There are a lot of advantages there. We will be less biased to all kind of, there are something called cognitive biases, which is you remember what you want to remember, all kind of things that are making our decisions not so rational, although we think they are. I think that the trend will be with years that we will be more rational about our decisions, and therefore we will also it will also improve the quality of our lives. However, I think that the downside of this is that we will slowly will kind of compromise on our intuition and our human qualities. So I think that our mistakes are also part of who we are. Like for example, when there is a radio in the car, before there were like the station buttons, people just rolled the dial, and it was less effective. But sometimes they stumbled upon stations they didn't plan and found interesting things. Once there are like 5 buttons for stations, they hear the same. So it's very effective. They're very happy, but they're losing something. And same thing with Waze. Of course, it brings you, and I'm all for it. But you need to understand you're compromising on something, on some of your human qualities. So my recommendation is that while we should continue and use technology, we can't stop it. We should also develop our connection with ourselves, and these qualities, the intuition quality, the ability to improvise, to create. So that's where I think things are going.
I think it's interesting, very interesting, and good to say that we should leave some room for error. We're becoming more efficient, but when we do that, we should leave some room for error, because that's where you find, by definition, the surprise or the thing you didn't expect, that you didn't know.
Exactly.
And I think that when we talk about digital identity, there's this saying that knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. And now we're getting to a point where there is so much knowledge and so many input devices that collect information, collect data, and bring it to the hands of this company or that company. And a lot of knowledge means a lot of power. And I think that all the information you just mentioned about the regulations and the trends and the benefits that are coming around the corner, at least for me, made a lot of sense as far as what's coming when it comes to digital data and information. And I want to thank you for all your input, all your information, all your experience. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this and see this video can take a lot of good points from that. Hopefully it helps them create amazing companies, amazing products and technologies that will help us shape a better future, a better tomorrow. Let's all thank Rooly for his time with us.